Michael Carter woke before dawn, even though his mind had not truly rested. He always woke at the same time, as if his body ran on the schedule he set for his busy tech company. He used to think early mornings were gift hours of quiet when he could plan and think. But now, in the hospital's family waiting room, the darkness felt heavy. The chairs were stiff plastic, and the pale walls held the echo of hushed voices and wheeled carts far off in the corridors. A small clock on the wall glowed for 15 a.m. Michael rubbed his eyes and tried to shake off the ache in his chest. His son Daniel lay in the intensive care unit, breathing through a ventilator. A sudden viral infection had knocked the boy's body down like a strong wind against a flimsy shelter. Doctors had fought hard, first with fluids, then with medicines, and day after day they watched charts and numbers. Sometimes machines beeped faster, and nurses rushed in, cords in hand, ready for emergencies. Michael felt caught between pride in the staff's skill and fear at the sight of their worry. In the early days, when Daniel first fell ill, Michael had been in his office, signing papers and leading video calls. His phone buzzed with alerts, inventory numbers down, sales forecasts slipping. But the alert he heard next was the worst. The pediatrician calling to say Daniel had a high fever and trouble breathing. Michael left work that instant. He drove through the city streets, past neon signs and empty gas pumps, his heart pounding every time Daniel coughed into the phone. By the time he reached the hospital, his son was already in a private room, hooked up to an IV and oxygen. In those first hours, Michael had paced the hallway outside the room like a caged lion. He worried about his son's breathing tube and the 4 lines, the monitors that measured heart rate and oxygen levels. He watched the doctor's face for signs of hope or dread. But the doctor spoke in neutral tones. "We will do everything we can." Michael felt anger and sorrow twist inside him, as if his best efforts in business meant nothing here. His usual power and confidence were useless in the face of illness. Michael was used to giving orders, told his staff what to do, and they did it. He negotiated deals, made plans, and moved his company forward. But here in the hospital, he was powerless, could not unlock new funding for his son's recovery, could not summon better treatments with a single phone call. He sat in that hard chair and waited, counting each minute like it was an hour. He remembered the day Daniel was born. The hospital room had been bright and warm, with pale yellow walls and a soft blanket wrapped around the tiny baby. Michael had paced the hallway then too, excited and nervous. When he finally held Daniel in his arms, he felt a love that was deeper than anything he had known. He whispered promises to protect him, to teach him, to help him grow. He whispered those same promises to the empty room, hoping his words could somehow reach his sleeping child. Nurses checked in on him with gentle smiles and warm cups of coffee. "How are you holding up?" they asked. Michael forced a small smile and thanked them, but he could not speak the truth. He felt like he was losing a part of himself. Daniel's laughter, his bright eyes, the way he called Daddy with a soft voice, those memories kept Michael going. He clung to them like a lifeline, afraid to let go. Every few hours a doctor would come in to check Daniel's chart. They adjusted medicines, talked in quiet tones, and said words like critical and stable. Michael learned to read between the lines. Stable meant they had no new worries today. Critical meant they were watching a sudden change. "We're doing all we can," the doctors repeated. He appreciated their kindness, but he longed for something more, some sign, like some promise that his son would open his eyes and smile again. The hospital corridors were filled with other families walking with slow steps, carrying pillows and blankets. Michael sometimes overheard snippets of conversation, a mother praying under her breath, a father calmly brushing his daughter's hair, a son reading a story out loud. These small acts of love reminded him that he was not alone. He saw a woman hold her child's hand, and it felt like a mirror of his own pain and hope. Despite the exhaustion, Michael visited Daniel whenever he could. He talked softly, telling stories about Daniel's favorite toys. The day he learned to ride a bike without training wheels, the time he laughed so hard he nearly fell off the couch. Michael hoped Daniel could hear him, that his voice would cut through the fog of illness. He brushed a strand of hair from Daniel's forehead and felt a memory of that newborn warmth. Around noon, the day shift nurse came on duty. She was kind and professional, with a calm confidence that Michael admired. She checked Daniel's lines, adjusted a monitor, and spoke to Michael with gentle respect. "I'll be here all day," she said. "If you need a break, let me know." Michael nodded. He had not thought about eating or sleeping properly since this began. His body was tired, but his mind would not rest. He feared what might happen if he closed his eyes. Michael's phone lay in his suit pocket, buzzing occasionally with business alerts. He tried to ignore them, but he could not shut out the world he had worked so hard to build. His company's growth, his board meetings, his investors all waited on him. He felt torn between two worlds, the high-stakes realm of business and the quiet fight for his son's life. Neither world gave him peace. As the morning passed, Michael noticed how each nurse and doctor moved with purpose. They had seen too many sick children, but they never lost their compassion. They answered questions, offered tissues for tears, and talked with families as if they were all part of one team. Michael realized that leadership came in many forms. He had led a company by giving orders. Here these nurses led with kindness, skill, and steady care. Around 3 in the afternoon, the doctor on call stepped in to update Michael. He used simple words and spoke slowly. "Daniel's vitals are holding," he said. "There is no clear sign of improvement yet, but we will continue all treatments and watch closely." Michael exhaled, relieved to hear that his son's body was stable. He thanked the doctor and squeezed Daniel's hand, careful around the IV lines. Later, as evening light faded through the hospital windows, Michael called his sister Sarah. She lived in another state and could not be here, but she wanted updates. As he spoke, he felt a tremor in his voice, told her about the days. News, the gentle care of the nurses, and the steady hope he held on to. Sarah's voice on the phone was calm and loving. She reminded him to rest and to lean on the medical team. Michael knew she was right, but he felt duty-bound to stay by Daniel's side that night. Michael moved to sit closer to Daniel's bed. He whispered stories from when Daniel was 3 and insisted on using a big shovel to help in the sandbox, even though it was almost as big as he was. He remembered the way Daniel's laughter rang out when he built a sandcastle taller than his knees. Michael smiled through tears, imagining that laughter again. He felt a gentle hand on his shoulder and looked up to see one of the night nurses. She offered him water and a quiet nod. Michael shook his head, telling her he was fine. But in the quiet, he felt a small seed of gratitude for every kind face, every soft voice. Even in the hardest darkness, there was light. As the night shift settled in, Michael realized that his power did not come from boardrooms or stock prices. His true strength was in his love for Daniel and his willingness to keep hope alive. He promised himself that no matter what happened, he would stay by his son's side with a steady heart and a caring hand. And in that promise, Michael found a new kind of strength, one that came not from success, but from the simple, deep bond between father and son. Michael woke the next morning to the soft hum of the hospital's air system. Rays of pale sunlight filtered through the blinds, casting gentle lines on the floor. His eyes felt heavy from another night of little sleep. Yet he rose and washed his face at the small sink outside the ICU. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for another long day by his son's bedside. When Michael entered Daniel's room, he saw a new face among the busy staff. A young nurse stood at the foot of the bed. She wore a calm expression, and her dark hair was pulled back neatly. In her arms, she held a small lavender cloth, Daniel's favorite toy, Michael realized. The sight made his chest tighten. The nurse turned as Michael approached. She smiled gently. "Good morning, Mr. Carter," she said in a clear voice. "Oh, Michael." Nodded, surprised that she already knew his name. The nurse introduced herself as Emily Nguyen. Her voice was soft but confident. She spoke directly to Daniel as if he could understand every word. Michael felt something stir inside him, curiosity. Mixed with hope, Millie adjusted Daniel's blanket with care, smoothing the folds like she was tucking in a child for bedtime. Then she leaned closer to the boy's face, her tone lowering to a whisper. "Good morning, Daniel. It's Emily. I know you can hear me." Michael took a cautious step forward. He had heard all the standard medical language before, but Emily's words felt different, more personal, more gentle. Emily turned to Michael. "I'd like to try something today," she said. Her eyes held kindness, but also purpose. "It may help." Michael's heart tightened. He asked, "What do you mean?" Emily explained that beside the usual treatments, she used a special method combining light touch with familiar sounds and scents. She believed that these sensory cues might help Daniel's brain respond. Michael felt skeptical. He had listened. Too many suggestions from well-meaning people. Yet Emily spoke with a calm certainty he had not seen before. He watched the way she moved with quiet grace, the way she spoke to Daniel not as a patient number, but as a small person who deserved care and respect. Emily placed the lavender cloth near Daniel's hand and gently stroked his palm. She whispered, "His full name, then his nickname, Danny." She spoke in a slow, rhythmic pattern. Michael noticed how the nurse's voice rose and fell like a soft lullaby. As she continued, she asked Michael to join in. She handed him the lavender toy. Michael took the cloth, his hands trembling slightly. He placed it against Daniel's cheek, remembering how his son pressed that scent to his nose every night before. "Sleep," Michael whispered. "You're my brave boy, Danny." He felt tears well up. The sound of his own voice felt strange after so many days of silence. Emily nodded approvingly. She reminded Michael to speak with warmth and to recall memories Daniel loved. Then she stepped back and watched. Michael spoke about a recent trip the two had taken to the park. How Daniel raced his friends to the swings, his laughter ringing through the air. He smiled through tears, picturing his son's bright grin. After a few minutes of whispering and gentle touch, Emily suggested adding a new element, soft humming. She hummed a simple tune, something she said was soothing for the mind. Michael listened, then joined in, matching her gentle melody. The room felt peaceful, as if the noise of machines had faded away for a moment. A small breeze from the vent stirred the lavender cloth against Daniel's hand. Michael held his breath, but nothing happened. No fluttering eyelid, no change in the monitor's gentle beeps. Michael's hope flickered and dimmed. He looked at Emily, expecting disappointment or apology. Instead, Emily smiled softly. "Sometimes it takes time," she said. "Our brains need cues to reconnect. Well, try again tonight. Out." She spoke in a tone that felt like reassurance rather than resignation. Michael nodded, grateful for her kindness, even if the result was not instant. Over the next hour, Emily worked calmly alongside the doctors and other nurses. She never rushed or complained. She checked Daniel's 4 lines and adjusted his pillow, always speaking softly to him. She took careful notes and then shared her observations with the medical team in simple, clear language. Michael realized she treated the staff as colleagues and the patient as a child who needed gentle care. When it was time for Michael to step out for a short break, Emily offered to sit with Daniel while he grabbed a quick bite. Did not want to leave his son alone. But he also needed strength for the long day ahead. With thanks, he allowed Emily to stay. She placed a hand briefly on his shoulder, offering reassurance. In the hospital cafeteria, Michael ate a simple sandwich, but his thoughts raced back to Daniel and Emily's special method. He wondered how a nurse could hold such quiet confidence. He thought about how Emily spoke to his son as if she believed the child could respond. Something about Emily's faith in his boy made Michael feel more hopeful than he had in days. Back in the ICU, Michael watched Emily closely. She knelt beside Daniel's bed, repeating his name and telling him about his favorite bedtime story. She had brought a soft, small flashlight and shone a gentle beam across the wall, creating patterns. She said that even the faintest light could help the brain notice shapes and form connections. Michael thought of his company's innovation, labs, where they used advanced screens and graphics to spark creativity. Here, Emily used a simple light and a story to spark life. As evening approached, Emily invited Michael to help again. She retrieved a small bottle of scented oil lavender mixed with a hint of citrus. She explained that Daniel's sense of smell was linked to memory and emotion. Michael had never considered smell therapy in a hospital room, but he trusted Emily. He dabbed a drop of oil on a cotton ball and gently held it under Daniel's nose. He whispered once more, "I love you, bud." Night came, and the room dimmed. Emily stayed past her shift, volunteering to watch over Daniel during the second wave of care. She sat quietly in the chair by the bed, her face peaceful. Michael felt something shift in the air, a sense of calm determination. He thought of how in his boardroom he had once rallied his team to solve complex problems. Here, Emily rallied Michael to believe in a new kind of solution. Just before midnight, Emily leaned close and whispered, "We'll keep going. I believe we can reach him." Michael felt a surge of gratitude. In this young nurse, he saw a partner. In his fight for Daniel's life, he realized that miracles often begin not with grand gestures, but with small acts of care done with love. Michael settled into his chair and watched Emily work. He felt less alone than in the past days. He thought of his son lying there, and for the first time in a long moment, he believed that someday Daniel would open his eyes and greet him. The night passed with no dramatic changes, but something unspoken had shifted. Emily's calm care had given Michael hope, and Michael's steadfast love had given Emily reason to keep trying. In the quiet room filled with soft humming, gentle light, and the scent of lavender, a new chapter began, one born of faith, compassion, and the unbreakable bond between father and son. Emily arrived early that morning with a gentle smile and a quiet confidence. The sky outside was pale with dawn light, and the hospital corridors were calm. Michael watched from the doorway as she paused before stepping into the ICU. She bent close to Daniel and whispered his name, then straightened and offered Michael a nod that said she was ready to try again. Michael took a deep breath and entered the room, carrying the small box Emily had given him the night before. Inside the box lay 3 items: a soft toy shaped like a robot, a small recorder with Daniel's laughter saved on it, and a picture Daniel had drawn of his family. Each item held a special memory, and Emily believed these objects could help stir Daniel's mind. Michael held the robot toy carefully. He remembered how Daniel had slept with it tucked under his arm every night. He placed it beside Daniel's hand. Then Emily pressed play on the recorder. A burst of happy, high-pitched giggles filled the small room. The sound echoed against the monitors and walls. Michael's heart pounded at the memory of that laughter. He leaned forward and whispered, "Danny, do you hear that? That's you having fun with your friends." Emily's eyes shone with hope as she watched Daniel's chest rise and fall in steady rhythm. Next, Emily took the drawing from the box and held it in front of a small lamp. She explained to Michael that the soft light and familiar image would give Daniel's brain shapes and patterns it knew. The lamp glowed warmly, and the drawing cast a gentle reflection on the white ceiling. Emily spoke softly. "Daniel loves drawing. He drew this for his family. I want him to remember that moment." Michael repeated the words, his own voice trembling. He told Daniel about that day in kindergarten when he had been so proud of his picture. He remembered how Daniel had jumped up and down, beaming with pride. He could almost feel his son's excitement in the room. Emily rested her hand lightly on Daniel's forehead and closed her eyes. She took a steady breath, then spoke in a low, even tone. "Daniel, your father and I are here. We love you. It's okay to come back to us." Michael watched her closely. He had never seen a nurse speak with such calm authority. She was not a stranger in a hurry. She was someone on a mission of compassion and faith. He felt both admiration and gratitude wash over him. The hours passed with slow precision. Emily returned every hour to refresh the toys, replay the laughter, and show Daniel new pictures from his room photos of his first soccer game. A snapshot of his birthday cake with candles lit, and a picture of him hugging his newborn cousin. Each time, she whispered stories to accompany the images, breathing warmth and memory into the silence. Michael stayed close, sometimes holding Daniel's hand, sometimes sitting quietly beside Emily, absorbing her method and believing in her. In the late afternoon, the pediatric neurologist made her rounds. She listened to Emily's description of the sensory therapy. The doctor nodded thoughtfully, then examined Daniel's readings. She checked his reflexes and noted the stable numbers. "Nothing harmful in what you're doing," she said to Emily. "In fact, I like the idea of adding personal memory cues. Let's continue and watch for any signs of response." Michael exhaled a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. He felt a surge of relief that the doctor approved the gentle approach. Thanked both women, his gratitude echoing in his voice. That evening, a small change surprised them all. As Emily played one of Daniel's favorite songs softly on her phone, a melody Daniel had once hummed 100 times, she saw a tiny motion. A finger twitched. At first, she thought it was her imagination. She checked the monitor. Everything still looked steady. Then she watched again. Daniel's toes curled, as if stepping into happy memories. Emily placed a finger beside his little toe and pressed gently. The toe curled again, this time more firmly. Michael gasped and moved closer to the bed. His heart pounded so loud he could feel it in his ears. Emily held her hand to her mouth, then whispered, "He's responding." She called the nurse at the desk to bring the on-call doctor. The nurse arrived quickly, her face serious but kind. Together, they examined Daniel's tiny movements. The doctor shone a small light into Daniel's eyes. The eyelid flickered. The doctor looked at Emily and then at Michael. "These are good signs," she said quietly. "Let's keep the therapy going, but also prepare for more tests to see which part of the brain is waking." Michael felt both joy and fear. The joy of seeing life stir and the fear of what might come next. As the tests were scheduled, Michael and Emily shared a glance full of unspoken hope. Michael asked her how she had learned this method. Emily spoke of her training in sensory neurology, nursing. She told Michael she had seen similar techniques help patients with brain injuries. "It's about giving the brain the right signals," she explained. "When we connect through what the patient loves and remembers, the brain can rewire itself." Michael nodded, absorbing each word. He realized again how little he knew about healing. In his world of data and contracts, this world of memory and love was entirely new. That night, when Michael asked to stay late, Emily welcomed him. They settled into the same routine. Emily placed the toys and pictures, and Michael whispered memories. Emily hummed the lullaby Daniel loved and lightly massaged his palm in a gentle rhythm. Michael watched Daniel's chest move in time with the humming. He placed a hand over Emily's, and they shared a moment of warmth in the quiet room. Michael felt his hopes swell with each breath. Close to midnight, Emily whispered, "Let's try something different." She dimmed the overhead lights and lit a small battery-powered lantern. The lantern cast a soft yellow glow. On the wall, it created a moving pattern of light. Emily began tracing shapes with her finger, and Michael followed, repeating the shapes. Aloud, circle, line, dot. They spoke slowly, giving Daniel's mind a chance to track the shapes and sounds. Michael noticed tears in Emily's eyes as she worked. He felt a surge of respect and a wish to know more about her life and why she cared so deeply, in the middle of tracing a circle. Daniel opened his left eye just a fraction. Emily and Michael froze. The small movement was so slight it's been a trick of the light. But then Daniel's brow furrowed and his eye opened wider. Michael's breath caught in his throat. Emily paused and said his name softly. "Daniel," she whispered. "It's Daddy and me." Daniel's gaze was unfocused, but he looked in their direction. The nurse standing by the door saw the movement and rushed to call the doctor. Moments later, the ICU team surrounded the bed. They checked Daniel's response and vital signs. The doctor exclaimed softly, "He's following the light with his eye." That's more than a reflex. The team moved quickly to record the progress. Michael leaned over and pressed a gentle kiss on Daniel's head. "You're doing it, bud," he whispered. Emily's face glowed with quiet triumph. After the excitement settled, the doctor spoke to Michael and Emily. "These are early signs, but they are important. We will continue the sensory therapy and add gentle physical therapy too." Michael nodded, feeling a rush of gratitude. He looked at Emily and realized she had given them the first glimmer of hope in days. He wanted to tell her how much her belief had meant, but words felt too small. Emily gathered the toys and pictures and packed them away for the night. She told Michael to get some rest and promised to continue the care. Michael reluctantly agreed. He left the ICU feeling lighter than he had in weeks. He knew the road ahead was still long, but now he believed it was possible as he walked down the corridor. carried the soft echo of Daniel's twitching foot in his heart. He thought about the power of a nurse's compassion and the strength of a father's love. In the quiet of the hospital night, he whispered a promise to return tomorrow with fresh hope. And somewhere in the stillness, he could almost hear a child's soft laugh, reminding him that miracles sometimes start with the smallest sign. Emily arrived that evening carrying a small basket with familiar items. The sky outside had turned a deep blue, and the hospital lights glowed through the ICU windows. Michael watched her enter the room with quiet hope. He felt a mix of excitement and fear. Tonight might be the night they saw a true change. Emily set the basket on a nearby table. Inside lay Daniel's favorite storybook, a soft blanket he loved, and a recording of his own voice singing a silly song. Michael remembered the day Daniel sang that song as he played with his toy train. Daniel's laughter had filled their home, bright and full of joy. Now those memories felt like treasure waiting to be found again. Emily knelt beside Daniel's bed and adjusted the pillow gently. She spoke softly to him, her voice warm and steady. Michael stood next to her, his hand on Daniel's chest, feeling the steady beat of his son's heart. The machines made soft humming noises, and the lights on the monitors blinked in slow rhythm. The room felt calm but full of tension, as if everyone held their breath. Emily began her routine. She opened the book to Daniel's favorite page. The page showed a friendly dragon and a brave knight. Michael remembered how Daniel used to point at the dragon's scales and giggle. Emily read the words in a low, soothing tone. She described the dragon's gentle roar and the knight's careful steps. As she read, she gently traced the dragon's picture with her finger, moving slowly so Daniel's eyes could follow if he could. After a few minutes of reading, Emily closed the book and picked up the recording. She pressed play. The room filled with a child's shy voice singing, "I'm a little rocket, flying to the moon." Michael felt tears in his eyes as he remembered Daniel teaching himself that tune. Emily let the song play twice, nodding at Michael to whisper along. Michael leaned down and repeated each line softly close to Daniel's ear. Then Emily brought out the soft blanket. She wrapped it around Daniel's shoulders, tucking it under his arms like a hug. She said, "Your blanket is here, Danny. It's your favorite." She gently stroked the blanket near his cheek. Michael watched her every move, his heart pounding. Next, Emily asked Michael to hold Daniel's hand. Michael reached out and felt the coolness of his son's skin. He whispered, "Daddy is here, buddy. I love you so much." He squeezed Daniel's hand lightly. Emily stepped back and began humming the lullaby Daniel had heard every night before sleep. The tune was simple, repeating 2 notes up and down. Michael joined in, humming softly. Their voices wove together in the quiet room. Time seemed to slow. The machines kept their steady beeps, but inside Michael's chest, his heart pounded like a drum. He watched Daniel's chest move up and down, waiting for any sign. Emily hummed for several minutes, then paused. She looked at Michael and nodded. It was time to watch. Michael leaned in close. He whispered every memory he had, building sandcastles, blowing out birthday candles, chasing butterflies in the garden. He told Daniel how proud he was of him, how brave and strong he always had been. His voice shook with emotion, but he spoke on. As Michael finished, Emily gently placed a hand on Daniel's forehead. She closed her eyes and took a slow breath, as if centering herself. Then she leaned forward and whispered Daniel's full name. The word hung in the air. Michael felt the silence press against his ears. Suddenly, the silence cracked. Daniel's breathing changed. It grew heavier, then lighter, as if he were waking from a deep sleep. Michael gasped. He leaned closer, his eyes wide. Emily opened her eyes and watched the monitor. Daniel's oxygen level stayed steady. But his face changed first. His eyebrows drew together, and his lips trembled. Emily whispered softly, "Daniel, it's okay. We're here." Michael's tears fell as he saw his son's lips part. A tiny sound escaped a soft moan that barely rose above the machine's hum. His heart leaped. Tears stung his eyes as he realized Daniel was trying to speak. The monitor beeped faster as nurses rushed into the room. Michael stood back, holding his breath. He watched Emily place a gloved hand under Daniel's head, supporting him gently. The nurses worked methodically, checking lines and adjusting settings, but all Michael saw was his son moving after so long of stillness. Then Daniel's eyes opened. At first they were unfocused, gazing at the machine lights. But he blinked once, twice, and looked toward Emily. Michael felt a wave of relief so strong it made his knees weak. He stepped forward, kneeling by the bed. "Danny?" he whispered, voice trembling. "Can you hear me?" Daniel's eyes met his father's. They were wide but not afraid. He let out another soft sound, meaning to speak but unable to form words. Michael felt tears roll down his cheeks. He reached out and brushed hair from Daniel's forehead. His voice shook. "It's Daddy. I'm here, bud. You're safe." A doctor checked Daniel's pupils and asked him simple questions. She spoke gently but clearly. "Danny, squeeze my hand if you can." Daniel's hand, still weak, closed around the doctor's finger. The doctor smiled. "Good job," she said. She looked at Michael and nodded. "He's responsive. We'll need more tests, but this is a wonderful step." Michael held Daniel's hand and felt a small squeeze in return. His tears flowed freely now. He had spent so many days hoping for this moment that he could hardly believe it was real. Emily stood next to him, her face glistening with happiness. She placed her hand on Michael's shoulder. "He's back," she whispered. Over the next hour, the ICU team monitored Daniel closely. They repeated tests and took notes. Each result showed stability and signs of returning function. Daniel's breathing tube stayed for now, but the doctors planned to remove it soon. Michael listened to each update, nodding but barely hearing the words. All he knew was that his son had opened his eyes. After the tests, the nurses cleared the room. Michael sat beside Daniel, cupping his son's hand. Daniel's breathing had calmed. He closed his eyes again, resting. Michael whispered, "Nice job, bud. You did it." He brushed his cheek against Daniel's hand, letting himself feel joy and relief. Emily gathered the sensory items. She closed the book and put away the recording. She folded the blanket neatly and placed it on a chair. She told Michael, "We'll continue therapy gently. He needs rest, but short sessions of this help the brain heal." Michael nodded, grateful that Emily would stay with them through every step. When the room was calm again, Michael asked Emily to stay a bit longer. He wanted to thank her properly. She sat down and looked at him with a gentle smile. "You did most of the work," she said softly. Her love and voice woke him. Michael shook his head. "Your care made him listen," he replied. "Thank you for never giving up." Emily stood and collected the items. She said goodnight to Daniel and Michael. "I'll be back in a few hours," she said. "Call me if you need anything." Michael watched her leave and felt a surge of gratitude. He turned back to Daniel, his son's hand still in his. As Michael sat in the quiet, he thought of how life could change in an instant. The panic and fear of the past days had given way to hope. He realized that success in business meant nothing compared to moments like this, when a child returned to his father. He whispered stories to Daniel about the day he learned to ride his bike, hoping his son would remember or learn again. Later that night, Michael stepped out to make a quick call to his sister. He barely spoke, his words full of tears and laughter blended. She congratulated him and promised to come as soon as she could. Michael returned to Daniel and watched his son sleep.
Ow.
Every gentle rise and fall of his chest was a miracle. Michael thought about the young nurse who had whispered hope to his son. He thought about the special therapy and the power of memory. He thought about the long road ahead of recovery. But in that moment, he felt peace. He knew they had witnessed something extraordinary. He stayed beside Daniel all night, holding his hand and speaking softly between sleep and wake. And in the gentle darkness, Michael realized that Lovend, a caring voice, could shine brighter than any machine. He closed his eyes briefly, grateful for the miracle that had happened. And in the heart of the hospital's quiet night, a father and son began their next chapter together. ChatGPT said, the next morning Michael arrived at the ICU before sunrise. The pale light in the hallway felt gentler now that hope had returned to his heart. He paused outside Daniel's room and took a deep breath, steadying himself for whatever the day would bring. As he opened the door, he saw Emily standing beside his son's bed. She held a small chart and looked up with a warm smile. Michael walked in and felt a rush of gratitude. Daniel lay on the bed with his eyes closed but breathing steadily on his own. The breathing tube had been removed overnight, and a nurse had explained that Daniel had tolerated the change well. Michael noticed the soft blanket Emily had brought, and the familiar robot toy tucked under Daniel's arm. Each item had taken on new meaning now that his son was awake. Emily spoke quietly so as not to wake Daniel. "He did well through the night. His vitals are stable, and he's resting comfortably." Michael nodded. He moved to the bedside and gently brushed Daniel's hair from his forehead. He watched the steady rise and fall of his chest and felt tears of relief gather. He whispered, "Good morning, buddy." Daniel stirred, his eyelids fluttering open. He looked around, his eyes focusing slowly until they found his father's face. Michael's heart pounded. He leaned close. "Hey there, champ." Daniel's lips curved into a weak smile. He tried to speak, but only a soft sound came out. Michael smiled back, encouraged, and said, "That's okay. You're safe here." A nurse came in to check Daniel's temperature and blood pressure. Michael stepped back but stayed close. The nurse praised Daniel for waking on his own and said that the doctors wanted to start gentle physical therapy soon. Michael agreed, grateful that each small step was taking them forward. After the nurse left, Emily handed Michael a small journal. She explained that she had been keeping notes of Daniel's responses, when he twitched his toe, when his eyes flickered, when he squeezed a hand. She encouraged Michael to add his own observations. Michael held the journal, thinking of how far they had come. He remembered those dark hours at the start, when every minute felt like an eternity. Now, he had a record of hope.
Michael
Sat down and opened the journal. He wrote today's date and noted that Daniel had awakened without the breathing tube. He described the smile on his son's face and the soft sound of his voice. As he wrote, he realized that every detail mattered. This journal would be a map of recovery, a reminder of small miracles. Later in the morning, the pediatric neurologist and a physical therapist entered the room. The therapist carried a small set of colorful balls and soft blocks. She explained that these tools would help Daniel regain strength and coordination. She encouraged Michael to help. Michael felt a flutter of nervousness, but nodded. He wanted to be part of this too. The therapist showed Michael how to hold Daniel's hand and guide him to grasp a ball. Daniel's fingers closed around the soft sphere, and he squeezed. The therapist cheered softly, "Great job, Danny." Daniel's eyes lit up, and he squeezed again. Michael's eyes filled with tears as he saw his son's strength returning. He guided Daniel's hand to the next ball, a bright red one. Daniel grasped it eagerly. Michael praised him. "You're doing awesome, buddy." Emily stood nearby, watching with a proud smile. She whispered to Michael, "He remembers how to play." Michael realized that play had been part of who Daniel was. His energy and joy brought life to any room. Now that play had returned, Michael knew the worst was behind them. After a few minutes of play therapy, Daniel rested. The therapist left, promising to return the next day for more gentle exercises. Michael tucked the blocks away and sat beside his son. He held Daniel's hand and told him about the plan. Soon, they would move to a different room, then home. He talked about all the things they would do together, visiting the park, reading stories before bed, and building sandcastles. Daniel listened, his gaze focused on his father. That afternoon, Michael stepped out to make a quick call to his company's coup. He explained that he needed a few more days away from work to care for his son. The COO's voice on the phone was kind, and he assured Michael that the team would handle operations until Michael returned. Michael felt a pang of guilt for leaving the company, but he knew he had to be here for Daniel. When he returned to the ICU, Michael found Emily reading a storybook to Daniel. The pages showed bright animals and playful scenes. Daniel's eyes followed Emily's finger as she talked about the tiger's stripes and the elephant's trunk. Michael sat quietly in a chair, watching the scene unfold. He thought about how Emily's simple acts, the touch, the story, the lullaby, had brought his son back to him. After the story ended, Emily closed the book and smiled at Michael. "He's doing wonderfully," she said. Michael nodded, tears in his eyes. He reached down and kissed his son's forehead. "Thank you," he whispered to Emily. She shook her head gently. "You did the work," she replied, as evening approached. Michael and Emily prepared for the next sensory session. They gathered familiar items: Daniel's blanket, his robot toy, and the recorder with his laughter. They also included a new item, a small photo album of family pictures. Michael flipped through the album and chose a photo of Daniel blowing out birthday candles, showed it to Daniel and said, "Look at this, Danny. Whose birthday was this?" Daniel's eyes lit up, and he let out a soft giggle. Michael felt a burst of joy. This was the son he knew. Emily played the recording of Daniel's laughter. The sound filled the room, and Daniel's face brightened. Michael watched as his son's eyes sparkled. He reached out and hugged Daniel's hand, and Daniel reached back, wrapping his small fingers around Michael's thumb. The bond between them felt stronger than ever. Later, Michael helped Daniel practice sitting up in bed. With Emily's guidance, he placed pillows for support and gently lifted Daniel's torso. Daniel sat and looked around the room, his eyes curious for the first time in days. He reached for the robot toy and held it close. Michael said softly, "You're sitting so tall, bud." Daniel nodded, his face serious but proud. After the practice, Daniel lay back on the bed, exhausted but happy. Michael tucked the blanket around him and whispered, "You're my brave boy." Daniel closed his eyes, a peaceful expression on his face. Michael sat beside him, holding his hand. That night, Emily stayed late again. Michael thanked her for her dedication. He realized that without her, Daniel might still be sleeping in that deep coma. Her faith in his son's recovery had given Michael hope when he needed it most. "Emily, why she did this work," she said quietly. "Because every child deserves a chance to come back to the people who love them." Michael nodded, moved by her simple truth. When Emily left, Michael sat by Daniel's bedside and stared at his son's face. He thought about the miracle they had witnessed, the tiny movements, the flutter of an eyelid, the squeeze of a hand. He thought about the love that had made it possible. He whispered a promise, to always be there for Daniel, to cherish every moment, and to carry this lesson of compassion into every part of his life. In the days that followed, Daniel's recovery continued. He began to talk softly, then in full sentences. He regained strength in his arms and legs. He laughed with his father and Emily whenever they visited. Eventually, the doctors declared him well enough to leave the hospital. On the day of discharge, Michael carried Daniel to the car, his son wrapped in the familiar blanket. Daniel pointed at the sky and said, "Look, Daddy, the sun." Michael smiled through tears and replied, "Yes, bud, sun is shining just for you." As they drove home, Michael felt a new sense of purpose. He realized that success at work was good, but nothing compared to the happiness of his son's recovery. He promised himself to balance his life differently, to make time for laughter, for stories, and for the simple joys that mattered most. At home that evening, Michael tucked Daniel into his own bed. He whispered the bedtime lullaby, soft humming, mixed with words of love, just as Emily had done. Daniel closed his eyes with a smile. Michael leaned down and kissed his son's forehead. He turned off the light and paused at the door, watching his boy rest peacefully. Michael knew the road ahead would still have challenges: follow-up appointments, therapy sessions, and the work waiting for him at the office. But he faced those challenges with a full heart and with the memory of what had happened here. He understood now that miracles could begin in the quietest moments, with a caring voice and a trusting heart. He closed the door gently and stood in the hallway for a moment, breathing in the stillness. Then he walked down the hall to the living room, where the baby monitor sat. He looked at the monitor's screen, which showed a sleeping child bathed in soft light. He thought of Emily's words and Daniel's journey. In that peaceful silence, Michael whispered to himself, "Thank you," and meant it with every part of his being. He smiled, knowing that love and hope had brought them through the darkest days. And as he returned to his own bed, he felt ready for tomorrow, for the days ahead, and for every moment he would share with his son.